In this video tutorial, we're going to import our lander and cocan into our large planet Mars and essentially create this animation where the ship flies in, picks up the cocan, and flies off again. I've begun by opening the large planet Mars, and the first thing I'll do is import the cocan. Going to File, I'll find the cocan.ma, and I'll import it in. Next, I'm going to scale it and put it inside the opening crater that we created. I've opened up the lander file we used in the previous animation where it flew across the planet Mars silhouetted with After Effects. And I'm going to delete the keyframes we had added to have the ship rock back and forth. I'll go back to the beginning of my timeline. I'll select the ring that we used to rig this. I'm going to go to Windows, Animation Editor, Graph Editor. And I'll marquee select the line and the keyframes, and I'll hit delete. Now before we import this in to the big planet to pick up the cocan, we're going to finish the rigging of the arm and the IK kinematics to articulate the arm. I'll start by going to a side view. In a side view, holding down the space bar, going to skeleton, create joints. I'm going to click anywhere down below the actual lander outside of the body, and then I'll let go, and I'll go and I'll click where the shoulder joint would be, and then the elbow, and then the wrist. I'll hit return, and you're going to see a green skeleton shape. Now, mine's a little small, so I'll go ahead and scale this up so it's easier to see. And we should have something like this. Now I want to make sure that it is in the rest of the arm, and it pretty much is. If it weren't, I could always hold down V on the keyboard, and then I could snap it to the geometry for the arm. Again, in the side view, we're going to add a thing called inverse kinematics. Now, inverse kinematics will allow us to articulate the wrist without touching the elbow. So the way we introduce it is by going back to skeleton, holding down the space bar, and you'll see create IK handle. I'm not going to click on the first bone we introduced. I'm going to click on the shoulder bone, which is down here, and then I'm going to go to the wrist, and you'll see a green line now. Now if I were to go to my perspective view and I start to move this around, you can see that skeleton is now moving and will articulate based on the keyframes we add to the wrist. I'm going to Z this out so it's embedded back in my geometry. But the arm is not following it, the actual geometry. So I will parent. I'll do so by selecting part of the upper arm. Holding the shift key, I'll click on the brown skeleton I see and hit P to parent. I'll do the same for the upper arm. I'll start by selecting the geometry and shift selecting the skeleton shape and hitting P to parent. Now if I were to grab the little brown lines I see emanating from the wrist area, the IK handles, and I move them, the arm now follows. I'm going to save. We'll take a look at this and talk more about it when we actually bring it into the planet with the cocan. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to go to my side view again. We had parented everything to this ring. We need to parent the skeleton and the IK handle, this little brown line, to that as well. So I'll start by selecting the main bone of the skeleton, and I'll shift select the path and hit P to parent. I'll select the IK handle, shift select the circle, P to parent. So now I'm going to click on the ring. I'll go to my perspective view, and I'm going to move this around to see if it does follow it. And you can see now that it is still following, and our propeller is still animated. Everything we do will follow the ring. So I'll just Z this out so the arm's back in the position I want. And I'm going to save. And the next thing we'll do is import this into our planet with the CoCan. I'm going to import the rigged lander. Going to File, Import, or Command I. And the first thing I'll do is turn off the planet Mars. And then I'll select my lander, hitting the up arrow until I see everything selected, including the green line at the bottom. I could select just that if I chose. I'm going to start to scale this down because it's got to be much smaller. So I'll start to bring it down. And then I'll just move it up so that when I turn the planet on again, I can locate where I want. So the objective is to get it over the crater with the CoCan. The first thing we're going to do is animate the lander coming and landing and then leaving. We'll need to have static frames between 130 and 170 so that the arm has time to pick up the CoCan. So I'll make sure my timeline is set for 300 frames, and I'll put my playback head at 130. And I'm going to deform the keyboard so I can select the ring. That NURBS ring controls everything. At 130, I will marquee select translate XYZ through rotate XYZ, and I'll right click and choose key selected. I'm going to shift and drag through the keyframe at 130. I'll right click and choose copy. I'll advance in my timeline to 170. I'll right click on the timeline and choose paste, paste. So now it will remain on planet Mars for that duration. I'm now going to put my playback head at the beginning of the timeline. I'd like the lander to come from the upper right hand corner of the viewport. Hitting W on the keyboard, I'll just drag it up to the corner. The actual distance will be decided once we've set all the rendering. Now I'm going to go to the end of the animation timeline, and I'll drag it off somewhere up along the left hand corner of the viewport. So if I was to play what I have now, the lander comes in and descends down, remains static over the crater opening, picks up the can, and flies off. Now I'd like to control the path a little bit more. I'd like to see the path. I'd like to have some arcs in here. So I'll stop my animation. I'll drag my playback head maybe to frame 60. With the lander selected, I'll hold down my space bar to get the hotbox. The third bar up and in the middle you'll see the word visualize. I'll click on it and I'll choose create editable motion trail. And you'll see a red and blue path. Red is where it has been and blue is where it will go. This allows me to not only see the path, but also if I wanted to say go back to 60, I can now drag up on my lander and it will put a keyframe for me there. I'll go to the other side and maybe I'll pull it up a little bit there, and I'll hit Command-S to save. In the next tutorial, we'll have the lander arm pick up the CoCan